Hey guys, so the much anticipated Kamala Harris plus Tim Walz interview on CNN happened last night. So we thought we'd do a whole streamer style breakdown and react to the entire interview. Ryan, of course, here with me. Hi, Ryan. Good morning.
How you doing? Yeah, you can tell that they waited way too long to do an interview by the fact that the New York Times last night had a live blog covering it.
About this one interview.
We are reacting to it
Yeah.
in real time. Trump did 3 interviews during her interview, and people were like, whatever.
Yeah, but they were with who were they with? Random.
Yeah,
he's into the podcast world. I know he's doing an
podcast
interview
world.
with Lex Friedman. That'll be kind of interesting.
And there was one that he did with this Florida reporter who asked him, "How are you going to vote on the constitutional amendment on abortion?"
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
and he's
abortion
like,
stuff.
He's going to vote against it for abortion rights.
I mean, that ballot initiative, the pro-choice side, is now going to get 90% of the vote because it was already at about 60%. And what it has to get 60% to pass, right?
Yeah, 60 or 67, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think now with Trump backing it, man, he threw those pro-lifers right under the bus, didn't he? And he's saying he's going to do IVF for all as well. So I guess maybe the path, Ryan, to Medicare for all is we'll just go body part by body part,
Yep.
procedure by procedure, and
Yes.
piecemeal it until we've got entire coverage for, for the entire body. So anyway, I'm sure we'll get to covering all of that next week. I actually want to set up, I've been trying for Breaking Points to set up a abortion debate. Sagar and I had this debate, but we're both pro-choice. So it'd be nice to have two people who are actually pro-life debating, the Trump campaign strategy and whether it's worth sacrificing
That's
someone
a very good idea.
Lila Rose, isn't that her name, who's been going
Yeah.
very forcefully on the pro-life side, this is outrageous. We need to hold him to account. As lefties, I feel a lot of compassion for their position because I feel like we're in the same spot with regard to issues like Gaza and Palestine.
Been there.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
In any case, we'll get to the interview now. But before we do, Ryan, you guys have a new story that you just broke on Drop Site News, which you guys should all, by the way, go and subscribe and support Ryan and Jeremy over there because you're doing phenomenal work. So what do you got?
Oh, yeah. So last night we published this piece about Ecuador this time. From 2007 to 2017, Ecuador had a social democratic government. They were called the Correístas, run by Rafael Correa. In 2017, it's very complicated, but a U.S. right-wing turn was it was a bit of a coup, bizarre situation. But what we have, and the next 4 or 5 years were spent prosecuting Correa and his allies. And what we have uncovered through a series of text messages that the prosecutor general, the attorney general, Diana Salazar, sent to a judge and also to a member of parliament that we've obtained and reviewed, show that she was very specifically targeting her prosecutions at the left and delaying prosecutions of the right in order to hurt the left in election campaigns, with in coordination and in constant contact with the U.S. ambassador.
Wow.
In Ecuador. So a lot of the times the U.S. is not carrying out the kind of old military coups that we're used to seeing from the 1970s and 80s, though we still, once in a while might dip back into that playbook. But in general, it's more what they call lawfare.
Right.
And using the public's hostility towards all politicians, the public is fed up with corruption. So then you have social democratic reformers coming in, and the way to combat them is just drop charges of corruption on them. And then the public's like, they're all the same.
This is like what was done to Lula in Brazil, for example.
Can't trust anybody. Exactly. And then a strong man comes in instead. It's exactly what they did with Lula, threw him in jail for corruption until those were exposed by Intercept Brazil, Glenn Greenwald, for being politically motivated. And we partnered with Intercept Brazil on this story as well. So
fantastic.
New elections coming up at the beginning of next year in Ecuador. So, and already this story's picking up a lot of steam there. So we'll see.
So this is the sort of thing that was likely suspected, both the targeting of the left, but also the U.S. involvement, but you were able to actually get the goods.
Right, exactly. So people could check it out. The way that last point on this, she was sending the messages using an app called Confide, which is popular in Latin America, which as soon as you read the message, it disappears. But what the guy was doing,
kind of a deal.
He was filming as he would read her messages with a second phone. And so we were able to he got a
Wow.
forensic analysis to prove that like
This
that
is
all
legit.
of this is authentic.
Wow.
So we have like 1,500 videos of messages that we had to like look through and then translate.
Wow, that's unbelievable.
You can see the result over at dropsitenews.com.
I'm looking forward to checking that out. I'm also looking forward to checking out your next exchange with Matthew Miller or whoever's at the State Department podium.
They haven't had a briefing in many weeks, but
Oh, have they really not? Jesus.
yeah, I think probably
How's that
not
even
until
allowed?
after Labor Day.
You know, I mean that. Anyway,
They need a vacation from their hypocrisy, just like anybody.
they can't take it either. Okay, all right. Let's go ahead and get to Comrade Kamala here, Coconut Kamala, and her very first interview. It is kind of a stunt. First interview post Biden dropout, which happened back on July 21st. So we're like a month and a week post Biden dropout, and we're finally getting her first interview, very strategically timed before the Labor Day weekend, I might add. Let me go ahead and pull this up, and we can just start playing it and react. Here we go, part 1. All right, here it is.
President, Governor Walz, thank you so much for sitting down with me and bringing the bus. Bus tour is well underway here in Georgia. You have less time to make your case to voters than any candidate in modern American history. The voters are really eager to hear what your plans are. If you are elected, what would you do on day one in the White House?
Well, there are a number of things. I will tell you, first and foremost, one of my highest priorities is to do what we can to support and strengthen the middle class. When I look at the aspirations, the goals, the ambitions of the American people, I think that people are ready for a new way forward. In a way that generations of Americans have been fueled by hope and by optimism. I think, sadly, in the last decade, we have had in the former president someone who has really been pushing an agenda and an environment that is about diminishing the character and the strength of who we are as Americans, really dividing our nation. And I think people are ready to turn the page on that.
So what would you do day one?
So out of the gates, a very, the most obvious question, what's your day one agenda? Very vague initial answer here, Ryan.
How do you get blindsided by the question, what do you plan to do as president? It reminded me.
Especially someone who, I'm sure she's wanted to be president for quite a lot of years now,
It reminded me a lot of, you remember Ted Kennedy's, and I was just going to pull it up, but people can just Google it. Ted Kennedy's 1980 answer to a similar question, like, why do you want to run for president?
No, I do not remember that, Ryan, but I'm sure you do.
Ted Kennedy himself he contemplated running for president in 1968. So this is 12 years, after he started at least very publicly thinking. He was probably thinking about running for president when he was 5 years old, right?
Yeah, you're a Kennedy. You're raised to do that.
1980, he's asked this question, and he flubbed it way worse than Harris.
Yeah.
But he's like, the country has a lot of natural resources, and it's like just people can YouTube like the interview that blindsided the Ted Kennedy presidential campaign, and they can watch it for themselves. At least she had an answer, but I'm going to like support the middle class. It feels like such a layup. You could say, all right, the first thing I do when I get in there, I'm going to send a bill to Congress that codifies Roe v. Wade.
Yeah.
After that, I'm going to send a bill that cuts taxes for the middle class and expands the child tax credit. Whatever.
Right.
Like things.
Yeah.
Things
right.
you're going to
Specific things
Yes.
that indicate. Because when we've interviewed presidential candidates, this is literally always our first question. Because it seems to me this is the starting point, and it gets at not just what are the laundry list of things that you claim. What is your priority? Because we all know that you're not going to be able to do all of the things that you want to do. So what is the flagship priority day one? And we get, help the middle class. And by the way, Trump is bad. Now she goes on, let me pull this back up. Dana actually presses her okay, but what does that actually mean? And then she goes into some of the specifics that she laid out in a recent economic policy speech. Let's go ahead and listen to that. But you can kind of tell she's just she, for whatever reason, had not really thought of what her day one priority would actually be. So now she's just reaching into the bag of policies she recently talked about.
Day one, it's going to be about, one, implementing my plan for what I call an opportunity economy. I've already laid out a number of proposals in that regard, which include what we're going to do to bring down the cost of everyday goods, what we're going to do to invest in America's small businesses, what we're going to do to invest in families, for example, extending the child tax credit to $6,000 for families for the first year of their child's life, to help them buy a car seat, to help them buy baby clothes, a crib. There's the work that we're going to do that is about investing in the American family around affordable housing, a big issue in our country right now. So there are a number of things on day one.
So I guess, Ryan, the positive, if we're looking for a silver lining here, is something you pointed out, which is that, being an empty vessel is a negative thing in terms of if you want someone who has like these core commitments, or like you're Bernie Sanders, you're going to fight for Medicare for all. We all know you're going to do it. Or even, Barack Obama, we knew healthcare was going to be a major focus for him as well. The plus side is that this allows you an opportunity as a public to pressure her into what you want to see happen on day one. And you made a point that I thought was interesting, that there's almost like in some ways a healthier relationship to Kamala Harris, because there isn't this cult of personality. It's just like, all right, this she'll do, and we've got an agenda that we're interested in, and maybe she'll be willing, especially with the addition of Tim Walz here, to get some pieces of it through.
Right. There is nobody on the Democratic side who thinks that they can just sit back and let Kamala Harris lead them to the promised land. Like zero people. Whereas that was an overwhelming feeling among Democrats when it came to Barack Obama.
Oh, yeah.
And then they were all let down as a result of that. Kamala Harris is not going to let anybody down. So it requires exactly the public to be involved and push her and say, okay, you know what? You don't really have any ideas for what you're going to do on day one, but we do. And here's how we're going to organize and pressure you to do those things.
Well, it's also why the choice of Tim Walz ends up being really important, because she can just do his agenda. He had a plan and he did a thing and didn't just talk about it, but actually was like, no, I'm going to figure out how to get these things through. So just do that. And that's part of why he felt so consequential, I think, to a lot of us when he was chosen, because he didn't just come with, as a person, and he's a talented politician and a great background and class diversity and a union member and all of those things, but he has a plan, had an agenda, and got it through. So she can just sort of grab that, or she could grab the, which there's a lot of overlap here, the pieces of Build Back Better that, that Bernie was pushing that never got pushed through. So that's the hope and the aspiration, is that's the thing that's sort of floating out there in the ether, that Kamala Harris, who clearly doesn't really have any thoughts or plans of her own, that she can just pick up on there.
Mm-hmm.
But you?
Well, I'm excited about this agenda, too. As I said, the idea of inspiring America to what can be. And I think many of these things that the vice president's proposing are things that we share in values. And the child tax credit is one we know that reduces childhood poverty by a third. We did it in Minnesota to have a federal partner in this. Unbelievable, I think, in the impact that we can make.
Yeah, and there's the Tim Walz, coming in to say, hey, we did this.
By the way, here's an actual policy.
Right. There was a lot made by the right of Tim Walz being part of this interview, which, on the one hand, I understand, because she hasn't done a solo interview. On the other hand, of course, it is, traditional, I guess, after the conventions to do a joint interview. The other thing that there's some irony to it, to me, because some segments of the right have thoroughly convinced themselves that Tim Walz was a horrific vice presidential pick. There was all kinds of like, oh, he's going to have to drop out any day now. Meanwhile, he has the highest favorability rating of anyone, of the four presidential and vice presidential candidates by far. And so they kind of flipped on a dime from he's such a catastrophe, he's going to have to drop out, to he's such a tremendous asset that she can't even do an interview without having him by her side.
Right. It can't be both things. But I think, she made this is a problem of her own making. It doesn't look weird to have them both together if she's also doing lots of other interviews.
Right. Yeah.
She hasn't done an interview practically since like that Lester Holt debacle. So
yeah, that's true. All right, let's see where we go from here.
Talked about, you call it the opportunity economy.
I hate
you
that phrase.
are well aware that right now many Americans are struggling. There's a crisis of affordability.
Yeah.
One of your campaign themes is we're not going back. But I wonder what you say to voters who do want to go back when it comes to the economy specifically, because their groceries were less expensive, housing was more affordable when Donald Trump was president.
Well, let's start with the fact that when Joe Biden and I came in office, during the height of a pandemic, we saw over 10 million jobs were lost. people, I mean, literally, we were all tracking the numbers. Hundreds of people a day were dying because of COVID. The economy had crashed. In large part, all of that because of mismanagement by Donald Trump of that crisis. When we came in, our highest priority was to do what we could to rescue America. And today, we know that we have inflation at under 3%. A lot of our policies have led to the reality that America recovered faster than any wealthy nation around the world. But you are right. Prices, in particular for groceries, are still too high. The American people know it, I know it, which is why my agenda includes what we need to do to bring down the price of groceries. For example, dealing with an issue like price gouging, what we need to do to extend the child tax credit to help young families be able to take care of their children in their most formative years, what we need to do to bring down the cost of housing. My proposal includes what would be a tax credit of $25,000 for first-time home buyers, so they can just have enough to put a down payment on a home, which is part of the American dream and their aspiration, but do it in a way that allows them to actually get on the path to achieving that goal and that dream.
So you have been vice president for 3.5 years.
Yeah.
The steps that you're talking about now, why haven't you done them already?
Well, first of all, we had to recover as an economy, and we have done that. I'm very proud of the work that we have done that has brought inflation down to less than 3%. The work that we have done to cap the cost of insulin at $35 a month for seniors. Donald Trump said he was going to do a number of things, including allowing Medicare to negotiate drug prices. Never happened. We did it. So now, as I travel in the state of Georgia and around our country, the number of seniors that have benefited. I was in Nevada recently, a grandmother who showed me her receipts. And before we capped the cost of insulin for seniors at $35 a month, she was paying hundreds of dollars, up to thousands of dollars a month for her insulin. She's not doing that anymore.
You maintain Bidenomics.
So that part where, what the answer to what do you say to people who actually are like, no, actually, I do want to go back to the economy under Donald Trump. The answer she gave there could have subbed in nicely for the day one answer. Mm-hmm. This one she was prepared for, right? She had gone over whatever they wanted to say here, and I thought she handled that quite well. In the same respect, it shows you, she's not like I said, that answer could have been great for the day one answer. She's not nimble enough on her feet to, if it wasn't specifically in the briefing book for the answer to that question, she's not able to pull it over in real time to insert it into the day one question.
Right. Yeah, that was right, exactly. So if she has prepared for an answer, she can deliver a good answer, and I thought she delivered that one quite well, right?
Yes.
And she's had some debate moments where she clearly had prepped, I was the kid on that bus or whatever, and she hit those marks quite well. So she can do that, and that is, prosecutors are probably, that's what you're trained to do. All right, here's the evidence we've got against this defendant. Here's how we're going to lay it out, and you deliver it well. Thinking on her feet, and which requires you to have some ideas, about exactly what you're going to do. Right. That's her challenge, because she's kind of just reaching for things.
That's a great point, because it's one thing to memorize the bullet points that someone else has given you. It makes it much easier in these situations to be extemporaneous if you yourself have an agenda, a plan in mind, core values, things you want to articulate. And, I think that's always been the challenge for her. The first debate back in 2020, when she did the whole "that little girl was me" thing, I mean, now it's curdled into being rather cringe, and they immediately started selling mugs and t-shirts that kind of forced it to become immediately cringe. She was fantastic in that debate. And not just in that moment, which did land at the time, but throughout the debate, I thought she was the best performer on stage. But part of why is because she was fairly low in the polls going into that, and she wasn't taking a lot of incoming. So she was able to pick her spots based on where she was prepared, and she was able to occupy more of that sort of prosecutorial position of, I'm going to challenge you with these things that I've already prepared and already thought through. And that's certainly when she's at her strongest and when she feels her greatest comfort. Or, a lot was made of the way she was in some of the Senate confirmation hearings with, Brett Kavanaugh, where people really liked how she performed. It's a similar deal, right? There, you prepare your staff, you and your staff, you prepare, you know what your line of questioning is, and you can go in. So, but in any case, the one other thing I wanted to note about this answer before we keep playing it is she has she's been unburdened in a lot of ways by the fact that people are unhappy with the Biden economic legacy. They don't blame her for it. It's amazing. Actually, she is now basically tying, in some instances exceeding Donald Trump in terms of who would be best on the economy. And I think part of the reason for that is, number one, I think just the fact that she's younger. And so there's more confidence she could actually do some stuff or at least communicate some stuff. Number two, she genuinely was sidelined in the Biden administration. So people aren't wrong to be like, oh, this lady had nothing to do with any of this. I think that's actually kind of accurate. And number three, she's able to more comfortably make the commentary she just did, which is like, listen, things were challenging. We did great work. We got a lot done, but we know people are in pain and there's a lot more that needs to be done. That piece of being able to really empathize with people and where they are right now, and especially the concerns over pricing, is something that she is more free to do than Joe Biden was. And of course, Joe Biden was not able really effectively to communicate about anything at this point outside of like NATO and AUKUS.
Oh, and one quick thing on that.
Yeah.
And our Trump supporting viewers, and we love our Trump supporting viewers, don't we, people, are going to pick up on her $35 insulin thing there. There's become a meme that actually Trump did that. And just the basic facts of this are Trump in mid-2020 did an executive order that basically encouraged pharmaceutical companies or who were dealing with Medicare to lower it down to $35 a month. It did lower prices for at least probably some millions of seniors on Medicare. Good for Trump for doing that executive order. 2 thumbs up for him. Biden did it through the Inflation Reduction Act and made it mandatory for everybody, not just some seniors who voluntarily got a benefit from it. So that's the difference between what they're talking about here.
Do you want to assign her any Pinocchios or anything like that?
The way she said it there
was accurate.
Was actually totally accurate.
Yeah, and I just saw some polling. I can't remember. I think it was a progressive pollster, but who polled all of her agenda items, and lowering the cost of prescription drugs and specifically insulin was like the number one most popular thing. So no surprise that
they deserve credit for that. They took on big pharma, like they legitimately did.
That's right. So no surprise that she emphasizes that here.
Is a success.
I maintain that when we do the work of bringing down prescription medication for the American people, including capping the cost of the annual cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000, when we do what we did in the first year of being in office to extend the child tax credit so that we cut child poverty in America by over 50%, when we do what we have done to invest in the American people and bringing manufacturing back to the United States so that we created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs, bringing business back to America, what we have done to improve the supply chain so we're not relying on foreign governments to supply American families with their basic needs, I'll say that that's good work. There's more to do, but that's good work.
So Ryan, before we go to the next question, any thoughts on that piece? You got asked about do you think the Bidenomics was good? Because, Bidenomics has become sort of a toxic brand just because of how unpopular, frankly, Joe Biden himself is.
Yeah, they roll through that stuff again like that. That's all great stuff. Now, the flip side of having cut child poverty in half is that when they let it expire, they doubled child poverty again. So, no credit for that. But yes, that agenda that was enacted in 2021 and into 2022, that was a old school European social welfare state that I think the country would love to see, brought back permanently.
Yeah, and if you look at the approval rating, actually, of Joe Biden, he was at his most popular when he was doing that, social democratic welfare state type of legislation, when people were benefiting from, COVID supports of a wide variety, including the child tax credit. And it's both when, a lot of the story of the Biden administration is those things being cut piece by piece by piece. You couple that with inflation. And then another pivot point, unfortunately, in the Biden administration was when he did the right thing and withdrew from Afghanistan. His approval rating takes a massive hit because of the, overwhelming media onslaught and punishment of him for doing what the American people have asked presidents to do now for years at this point. And then, his decline and inability to really defend himself or articulate what he's up to or what the agenda is or why people should believe in it. And you lead to, the abysmal approval rating, abysmal assessment of Bidenomics, et cetera, that we see today.
Yep.
To get some clarity on where you stand on some key policy issues. Energy is a big one. When you were in Congress, you supported the Green New Deal. And in 2019, you said, quote, "There is no question I'm in favor of banning fracking." Fracking, as you know, is a pretty big issue, particularly in your must-win state of Pennsylvania.
Sure.
Do you still want to ban fracking?
No, and I made that clear on the debate stage in 2020. That I would not ban fracking. As vice president, I did not ban fracking. As president, I will not ban fracking.
in 2019, I believe, at a town hall, you said you were asked, would you commit to implementing a federal ban on fracking on your first day in office? And you said, there's no question, I'm in favor of banning fracking. So yes. So it changed in that campaign?
In 2020, I made very clear where I stand. We are in 2024, and I've not changed that position, nor will I going forward. I kept my word, and I will keep my word.
What made you change that position at the time?
Well, let's be clear. My values have not changed. I believe it is very important that we take seriously what we must do to guard against what is a clear crisis in terms of the climate. And to do that, we can do what we have accomplished thus far. The Inflation Reduction Act, what we have done to invest, by my calculation, over probably $1 trillion over the next 10 years, investing in a clean energy economy. What we've already done, creating over 300,000 new clean energy jobs. That tells me, from my experience as vice president, we can do it without banning fracking. In fact, Dana, excuse me, I cast the tie-breaking vote that actually increased leases for fracking as vice president. So I'm very clear about where I stand.
And was there some policy or scientific data that you saw that you said, oh, okay, I get it now?
What I have seen is that we can grow and we can increase a thriving clean energy economy without banning fracking. Okay.
So there you go. That's part one. There's 3 parts here that we want to get through. But what'd you make of that fracking exchange, Ryan? It's pretty slippery. It's pretty slippery.
It's just tough. It's just tough because the honest answer is I was pandering to the Sunrise Movement and the youth vote, trying to win the Democratic nomination for president in a period where the left was ascendant.
Right.
I failed at that, and now I'm doing a different political thing.
Right.
So I think if you're not going to be honest about it, like the best approach would be, if you had to clearly they workshop, like, all right, how do we answer this and not sound like complete frauds?
Right.
To say, okay, look, at the time I thought you needed to ban fracking in order to confront climate change, but now I think you can actually confront climate change without banning fracking. Now, that's a lie. It's not blah 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 blah. But like, I guess that's the best you can come up with. I don't know how if you were Kamala Harris, without saying I was lying because I was pandering to youth voters, like how would you?
I mean, I guess you could frame pandering in a positive light of like, I'm responding to what voters want, right? Yes. And at the time, voters were saying, we want you to ban fracking. Sorry, the dog is in here now. She's moving everything. So you could frame pandering as like being responsive to the will of the voters. But no, I think that saying my values are the same, but new information, I realize that we can now do this without banning fracking, I think probably is the best that you can do. And I mean, it's fair to say that
value is that I would like to win the election. And that hasn't changed.
True. True. I mean, I think she could fairly claim that technological developments are changing what's possible, blah, blah, blah. But the part that to me came off as the most weaselly is when she said something like, in 2020, I stood on the stage and said I would not ban fracking or something like that. And Dana immediately was like, yeah, but 3 minutes before that, you were saying the polar opposite, which is kind of the point here. So there's no real wiggling out of this. And she comes back because this is not the only position that she's changed, obviously.
Right. She ran as Bernie in 2019.
Yeah, for a while. And then also, she starts off supporting Medicare for all because she thinks that's the thing. Then she gets donor pushback. Then she moved off of that even at the time. So, so in any case, I think
her argument was, I flip-flopped on this 4 years ago.
Right. Yeah, I've long flip-flopped on that. I moved off this a long time ago. Why are you still bugging me about it?
Yeah.
Now, one other thing that I'll say is there is a lot of justified criticism of Kamala Harris, just very clearly shifting her positions depending on what she thinks is advantageous. We were talking about Trump earlier on abortion. Like, he does the same thing, even perhaps even more shamelessly, because is there a position on abortion that he hasn't held at this point?
Right, not yet.
From Planned Parenthood supporter to saying that he's so pro-life that women should be criminally punished if they have an abortion, to now being, coming back to the pro-choice side of things. Like, he literally shapeshifts, even sometimes within the same conversation. But he's just much more difficult to kind of pin down on those things. So people don't. This isn't the line of attack that they take against Trump, that he's a flip-flopper for whatever reason. I'm not really sure why that is, but they don't think that they would be able to really nail him with that charge.
Right. Right. Nobody thinks he has convictions.
True. Yeah. So they're not
even his
expecting.
supporters.
Yeah. True. All right. Let me pull up part 2 here. Here we go. Okay. Oh, by the way, I just want to mention I have this on 1.25 speed just to not, make people think that I'm manipulating the video or whatever, just to get through it a little bit quicker.
As vice president, you were tasked with addressing the root causes of migration in southern countries and
Northern part of Central America.
the northern part of Central America that affects the southern border of the U.S. During the Biden-Harris administration, there were record numbers of illegal border crossings. Why did the Biden-Harris administration wait 3.5 years to implement sweeping asylum restrictions?
Well, first of all, the root causes work that I did as vice president, that I was asked to do by the president, has actually resulted in a number of benefits, including historic investments by American businesses in that region. The number of immigrants coming from that region has actually reduced since we began that work. But I will say this, that Joe Biden and I and our administration worked with members of the United States Congress on an immigration issue that is very significant to the American people and to our security, which is the border. And through bipartisan work, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Congress, a bill was crafted, which we supported, which I support. And Donald Trump got word of this bill that would have contributed to securing our border. And because he believes that it would not have helped him politically, he told his folks in Congress, don't put it forward. He killed a bill, a border security bill that would have put 1,500 more agents on the border. And let me tell you something, the Border Patrol endorsed the bill. And I'm sure in large part because they knew they were working around the clock and 1,500 more agents would help them. That bill would have allowed us to increase seizures of fentanyl. Ask any community in America that has been devastated by fentanyl what passing that bill would have done to address their concern and the pain that they've experienced.
So you would push that legislation again. I just want to ask
about push it. I will make sure that it comes to my desk and I would sign it.
Just one other question about something that you said in 2019.
I don't know if I've talked to you, Ryan, about this whole Democrats think they were so clever with this whole we're going to adopt the Trump border agenda and then, try to get Republicans to pass it and then do this gotcha. Aha, see, we did a jiu-jitsu move and actually we're the real border hawks and we're the ones that really want to do the fascism on the border. I think that this is both immoral and the wrong policy. But I also think, and it's the critical part is it decoupled what has long been the path of having comprehensive immigration reform, path to citizenship, and the the border sort of crackdown measures. And they just took out the border crackdown measures and just try to pass that. They thought this was a brilliant jiu-jitsu move. Meanwhile, I'm sure you saw this, Paul Sager and I talked about it on the show. Because Democrats have accepted the Republican framing on immigration, and also because of the reality of high number of border crossings and, migrants being bussed into blue cities, et cetera, higher immigration has never been more unpopular, and decreasing immigration has never been more popular. So basically, under Trump, actually immigrants were more popular than ever before. And now under Biden, they are, at a low in terms of support for increasing levels of migration. I really owe it to this political philosophy, which I think is utterly foolish outside of, again, I think immoral, wrong in terms of what would actually be good for the country, et cetera.
And we already have multiple experiments of this being tried in Europe. All the center-left European parties, when there was a migration surge over the last 10 years in Europe, swung far right to try to say that they were just as tough on immigrants as the right wing, but they were going to be more humane, and liberal and reasonable about it. And they all were obliterated. Like there's basically no center left.
That's right.
In Europe. Or you can think about the clip I guess we didn't play the Trump clip, but of Trump talking about abortion rights with this Florida reporter. So now he's pro-choice. He's going to vote against the constitutional amendment. He's going to vote for basically, allowing abortion in Florida all the way up to
viability.
Whatever.
It's basically codifying Roe in Florida,
right.
Effectively.
So, first of all, does anybody believe, as a result of Trump saying that Republicans are good on abortion rights? Like nobody believes that.
Yeah, and you're literally the guy who put these justices on the bench.
So in the same way, does anybody believe that Democrats are the ones, like if you really want somebody who's going to crack down on the border,
of course
who's it going to be? Democrats or Republicans? Come on.
Of course.
But what will Trump's capitulation on abortion rights do to the polling? There'll be some Trump supporters who are like, you know what? Like you said, that Florida amendment now will probably pass in massively, with bigger numbers than it would have otherwise. So in this, and you see the flip side on immigration, the numbers moving. People are like, all right, well, if Democrats are for this and Republicans are for this. Let's do it. But in your debate with Sagar, you guys talked about how there's a correlation between illegal crossings and people's anger at abortion, at immigration, and the desire to reduce those crossings. So what you could do is actually do what Kamala was talking about, is the root causes. Mm-hmm. It's true that in Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador, where she was tasked with reducing outflow, there has been a reduction in outflow. It doesn't have a lot to do with what the U.S. did. A lot of Bukele in Honduras, you had a social democratic and Xiomara Castro come in who made things a little bit better. But a lot of the migrants are coming from Haiti, Venezuela, and Cuba, and they're all coming as a result of U.S. policies. So we could, if Democrats actually want to do something about it, rather than trying to act like Republicans, they could actually just stop sanctioning Venezuela, stop messing with and destroying Haiti, and stop sanctioning and destroying Cuba, and boom, some massive portion of the migration flow into the border just stops cold. People would prefer to stay where they are.
Yes, that's right.
We flatter ourselves
thinking the whole world wants to come here.
Wants to come here. That's not right. If you live in Venezuela or Cuba, you want to stay there.
The other thing is, we are in a different place economically than we were when Trump was first running in 2016. And if you take him seriously about literally deporting all 12, 15 million, however many undocumented immigrants that we have here, the level of economic catastrophe that would be is basically unfathomable. I mean, we have a low unemployment rate. Now, the wages aren't high enough. There's a lot of problems in the labor market, but it's actually not a high unemployment rate. There isn't a massive, unemployed group of laborers out there waiting to, pick the strawberries in the field or lay the roofing in the construction or help build the houses that we desperately need to build in this country.
Teaching
that's exactly right. I mean, if you just look at instead, the most salient issue that people tell us over and over again is their biggest economic concern is prices. Yeah. If you genuinely kicked out of the country all 15 million of those workers or whatever the number is, the amount that the prices of all of your grocery items and of every new house, the amount that would skyrocket is literally insane. Not to mention, the massive cost to the state and what an incredible imposition, talk about the deep state or the police state or whatever. It's unfathomable how you would have to crack down and surveil and militarize this response to round all of these people up, many of whom have been here for many years, et cetera. If you actually take it at face value from an economic perspective, it's utterly insane. But, again, no one is making that argument. No one. So, right. Of course, the public is oh, well, the Democrats and the Republicans agree, so I guess they're right. I guess we just need to do this border crackdown, and that's that. And these immigrants are just net bad in every single way, which of course is not the reality of the immigrant population, both legal and illegal, that we have in this country at this point.
Yeah.
All right, let's see what we got next.
When you first ran, there was a debate. You raised your hand when asked whether or not the border should be decriminalized. Do you still believe that?
I believe there should be consequence. We have laws that have to be followed and enforced that address and deal with people who cross our border illegally. And there should be consequence. And let's be clear, in this race, I'm the only person who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations who traffic in guns, drugs, and human beings. I'm the only person in this race who actually served a border state as Attorney General to enforce our laws. And I would enforce our laws as president going forward. I recognize the problem.
Generally speaking, how should voters look at some of the changes that you've made, that you've explained some of here in your policy? Is it because you have more experience now and you've learned more about the information? Is it because you were running for president in a Democratic primary? And should they feel comfortable and confident that what you're saying now is going to be your policy moving forward?
Dana, I think the most important and most significant aspect of my policy perspective and decisions is my values have not changed. You mentioned the Green New Deal. I have always believed, and I've worked on it, that the climate crisis is real, that it is an urgent matter to which we should apply metrics that include holding ourselves to deadlines around time. We did that with the Inflation Reduction Act. We have set goals for the United States of America and by extension the globe around when we should meet certain standards for reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, as an example. That value has not changed. My value around what we need to do to secure our border, that value has not changed. I spent 2 terms as the Attorney General of California prosecuting transnational criminal organizations, violations of American laws regarding the illegal passage of guns, drugs, and human beings across our border. My values have not changed. So that is the reality of it. And 4 years of being vice president, I'll tell you, one of the aspects to your point is traveling the country extensively. I mean, I'm here in Georgia. I think somebody told me 17 times since I've been vice president in Georgia alone. I believe it is important to build consensus. And it is important to find a common place of understanding of where we can actually solve problems.
On that note,
any reflections on that part? First of all, her favorite phraseology at this point is transnational criminal gangs. She tries to say that as much as she possibly can.
Yeah, it's the same problem that she has with all of the other, left-wing positions that she took in 2019, 2020.
Yeah, it's the same. Like,
how
my
do you
values haven't
say
changed.
like? I was pandering then. I'm pandering. Like there's no good answer. You just flip flop. You're trying to win elections.
Yeah, you just got to stick to the script and hope that the questioner moves on ultimately.
Yes.
you had a lot of Republican speakers at the convention.
Yes,
Will you
she
appoint a
does.
Republican to your cabinet?
Yes, I would.
Anyone
Yes,
in
I
mind?
would. No one in particular in mind. We got 68 days to go with this election, so I'm not putting the cart before the horse. But I would. I think it's really important. I have spent my career inviting diversity of opinion. I think it's important to have people at the table when some of the most important decisions are being made that have different views, different experiences. And I think it would be to the benefit of the American public to have a member of my cabinet who was a Republican.
What did you think of that, Ryan? Because
Just-
there was a lot of online commentary on the left about this comment.
Right, because everyone immediately is like, wait a minute, you can have a Republican in your cabinet, but you can't even have a Palestinian give a 2-minute vetted speech on stage at the DNC where they're supporting you. So I think that part punched a lot of people in the face. But in general, like, Obama had Ray LaHood as his transportation secretary, this like moderate Republican. And, he did fine as a transportation secretary. It's like, you can find a Republican who's going to, there's also now like so many cabinet positions. They've elevated a whole bunch of things to quote unquote cabinet level positions that you can harmlessly toss one of those to a Republican if it, if you think there's some political benefit and you're going to win over the Bill Krystals and other never Trump Republicans.
Yeah. I mean, I do think, like, even though we may discount it, there are a lot of, like, moderate suburban, formerly Republican, whatever, who hear this and like, oh, she's,
the party should
that's
get
very
along
reasonable.
is the thing that you hear from normies. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, I mean, I sort of felt the same. I felt all of those emotions because the point about like, oh, all they ever do is reach out to Republicans and punch the left, right? And and for the beginning of the Harris campaign, which is now all of like a month old, you didn't see a lot of that. I mean, the choice of Tim Walz was the most dramatic break from that pattern. I just assumed like, oh, progressives want this guy, the left wants this guy. There's no way it's going to be Tim Walz. And then that comes as a major shock. At the convention and in this interview, you get the sense that those old Democratic Party patterns are taking hold. And it's almost like, there's the classic political theory of like, oh, in the primary, they dance this way. And then in the general election, they go back the other way, the like primary general election 2-step. And I guess that's happening here. It's just in a very condensed timeline since there wasn't, really there wasn't a primary at all. And so she went from 2 weeks of being relatively benevolent towards the left to now doing the normal Democratic like general election, I'm going to get a Republican in my cabinet thing. I will say some people online were floating like, hey, why don't you pick like Susan Collins, for example, or like another Republican senator in a state with that a Democrat could win or that has a Democratic governor that appoints the senator, et cetera, et cetera. So on its face, I don't hate having the idea of having a moderate Republican in, especially if it kind of gives you cover to do something that's meaningless as a gesture to the right, but then have an agenda that's actually like populist in the way that the agenda she has announced is populist and does represent, some of the better parts of the Biden administration.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about your opponent, Donald Trump. I was a little bit surprised. People might be surprised to hear that you have never interacted with him, met him face to face. That's going to change soon. But what I want to ask you.
Have you met Trump face to face, Ryan?
Been in rooms, but not really. Like
So
big rooms, yeah.
this was surprised. I didn't know she'd never met him. I actually,
Have you?
The White House Correspondents' Dinner after the one where Obama humiliated him, I was doing like a red carpet interview thing for MSNBC, and him and Melania came. And this was back when he was teasing that he might run, but it hadn't actually, and no one was taking him seriously, right? Everyone was like, okay, yeah, whatever. This is just a stunt to help you with your apprentice brand, which may have been true, by the way. Anyway, so yeah, I asked him the question I asked, like, hey, what happened with those private investigators down in Hawaii that you were sending to look at Obama's birth certificate? And he was like, that's the wrong question, Krystal. That's the wrong question. So.
Yeah, I was at that dinner too. My table was actually really close to his. I was just watching him the whole time, and his face was just boiling.
Yeah. So anyway, funny that she's never met him face to face.
About is what he said last month. He suggested that you happened to turn black recently for political purposes, questioning a core part of your identity.
Yeah.
Any
Same old tired playbook. Next question, please.
That's it?
That's it.
Okay. Let's
Great answer. Best part of the interview, in my opinion. Like, learned a lot from the failures of the Hillary Clinton campaign.
Yep.
This is exactly and so different from how Democrats have handled Trump the entire time, which would any other moment this would have launched into some long moralizing tirade about it, and this would have been a multi-week news cycle. And instead, because of the way she handled it at the time, which was also very dismissive like this, everybody just moved on, and it didn't work. It didn't work.
Yeah, makes him look weird and like a loser.
Yeah, exactly. And they're just like, okay, whatever, moving on. This is exactly. And just an overall note, Dan, I think at one point, we'll get to it, asked her specifically about her identity, but very different from the Hillary Clinton campaign. She really does have the sense of like, look, people can see I'm a black woman. Like, I don't need to talk about it. You know, the trailblazing status, or that's obvious. And it's not what people care about, and it's sort of narcissistic to always constantly be leaning into like what this means for me personally on my journey of self-discovery and, and ambition. So I think that's been one of the smarter aspects of this campaign.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some foreign policy issues that would be on your plate if you become commander-in-chief. President Biden has tried unsuccessfully to end the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. He's been doing it for months and months, along with you. Would you do anything differently? For example, would you withhold some U.S. weapons shipments to Israel? That's what a lot of people on the progressive left want you to do.
Let me be very clear. I'm unequivocal and unwavering in my commitment to Israel's defense and its ability to defend itself. And that's not going to change. But let's take a step back. October 7, 1,200 people were massacred. Many young people who were simply attending a music festival. Women were horribly raped. As I said then, I say today, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. And we have got to get a deal done. We were in Doha. Mm-hmm. We have to get a deal done. This war must end. In the meantime, and we must get a deal that is about getting the hostages out. I've met with the families of the American hostages. Let's get the hostages out. Let's get the ceasefire done.
But no change in policy in terms of arms and so forth.
No, we have to get a deal done. Dana, we have to get a deal done. When you look at the significance of this to the families, to the people who are living in that region, a deal is not only the right thing to do to end this war, but will unlock so much of what must happen next. I remain committed since I've been on October 8 to what we must do to work toward a two-state solution where Israel is secure and in equal measure, the Palestinians have security and self-determination and dignity.
Your thoughts, Ryan?
Well, Dana said some weapons. I know maybe Harris didn't even pick up on that.
Yeah, she didn't even say like completely
She just said some weapons. Like the Biden administration has even said that they would restrict some weapons, like the 2,000-pound bombs used for offensive purposes. It seems like Harris. People keep saying that Harris is better rhetorically and more empathetic. Where's the empathy there? Like when you're actually not even standing by the tiniest of concessions that the Biden administration, her administration, has made. Seems like she very clearly wants to just say she unequivocally, unconditionally, whatever, supports Israel's right to defend itself. Whereas even Biden would say, well, maybe the 2,000-pound bombs dropped on refugee camps, we're not gonna allow that, or at least we won't allow it for like a 2-week pause period.
Well, that's such a great point that she could have really leaned into. I mean, it's kind of bullshit because they ultimately released those weapons, whatever, right? And have given Israel ultimately everything Israel could possibly want and more. But it is enough of a fig leaf to allow her to create some sense of separation, at least from the Biden administration, by leaning into that. Like, listen, we did this with the Biden, with Joe Biden. We said this is unacceptable, and we did withhold it. And I would keep that option on the table. So there was a way to say this with, there's such concern on this one issue. There's such concern about a clear break with the Biden policy. There's no concern on that on literally any other issue. But she clearly feels like, or, also maybe just ideologically believes or feels that that's less likely, because I don't think she has ideological beliefs, but she feels this is where the pressure is, as she needs to prove how committed to Israel she is. And she doesn't feel as much pressure from the left for whatever reason, whatever political calculus she's doing, which, by the way, I think is foolish when you look at the polls.
Right.
But yeah, on this one issue, she feels like, I have to just stay lockstep with the Biden administration, not show any sort of, distance. And I think that's an excuse. Like, I see people making that excuse for her. I think that's kind of a bullshit excuse. And
when Dana Bash says that this is what the progressive left wants you to do, it's true that the progressive left wants you to do that, but so does more than 60% of the country.
Yes, that's right. That's exactly right.
Approval for Biden's Israel policy is in the 20s. He's less popular on his Israel policy than he is on his approach to inflation and immigration.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And breaking with him would be a political benefit. And then she leans in to the mass rape claim because she understands that there's absolutely no consequences, for saying that, despite the fact that there is not yet evidence of that being the case.
Right.
In fact, Israel's so desperate to produce some evidence. I don't know if you saw this last week.
I did, yeah.
This Facebook group produced a letter that we now have confirmed is a complete hoax, making up like the most horrific things. And it spent a week getting shared by prominent journalists, and then the admission that it was actually a hoax was just quietly.
It just gets buried.
Announced. Yeah.
Yeah, and meanwhile, on the contrary, we have seen on camera IDF soldiers gang raping a Palestinian prisoner.
Right.
And that somehow
dozens of cases confirmed by Human Rights
organizations.
B'Tselem. Yeah.
So we have lots of documented evidence of systematized sexual assault of Palestinians who are being held in this, prison concentration camp. So bad that even the Israelis felt like, we got to at least pretend like we might prosecute some of these guys, and then come under massive, pressure and huge backlash from their own citizenry. But that somehow never gets mentioned. So I had a question for you specifically, because you've done so much work reporting on the political incentives and shaping of, the Israel-Palestine conflict in this war specifically. My hope for Kamala Harris was kind of the hope of this is just a political cipher. She doesn't believe anything. Biden is an ideological Zionist. You are not moving him off that position, period, end of story. My hope was that she would look at the polling that you mentioned, hey, this isn't just the progressive left. A clear majority of the country, including a very clear majority of independents. Republicans are the only one opposed to this, and they're not voting for you anyway, so don't worry about them. They want a ceasefire, but they want to see weapons. They don't want their taxpayer dollars going to drop bombs on children who are in tents in refugee camps. They don't want that. And there's been a lot of polling at this point about how just pure cynical electoral calculus, you have more to gain from taking the position of the quote unquote progressive left than continuing to do this whole Israel has a right to defend themselves no matter what. And yes, they can do a genocide. And yes, they can drop the bombs on the babies in the tents and have a polio epidemic and whatever endlessly. And I'll never do anything about it. That was my hope. But it doesn't seem like she's making that calculus. It seems like she feels the pressure she feels is the pressure that Democrats and Republicans, but Democrats in particular, have felt from time immemorial that they can't piss off, the Israel lobby or, the people for whom this is a diehard commitment to the end of time.
Yeah, I think part of it is that ingrained fear of decades of that commitment to the pro-Israel lobby. And then I think also my guess is that the campaign is nervous about what's going to happen on college campuses between now and the election. And they think that
she's not helping things with these kind of comments.
No, right. That's an interesting point. Yes, she will make things worse. Like, the way to end these campus protests is to get a ceasefire deal and just force it. Like, the Israeli government already put forward a proposal that Hamas accepted. Just implement it. Just do that. Like, you could do that. You're the United States of America, most powerful empire in world history. Not doing that is going to inflame campus protests for the next 2 months, and I think that they don't want to be at all associated with those campus protests.
Not to mention, the longer this goes on, the more likely you are to have a larger regional war. That means that not only are you going to be hobbled politically in terms of getting yourself elected right now, but your whole presidency is going to be hamstrung by being, tied once again into an unpopular war in the Middle East. And whatever, thoughts you may potentially theoretically have about a child tax credit, et cetera, like, all of that is going to be undercut if you are boxed in the way that Bibi wants to box you. First, he wants you to lose. Okay. He's doing his best to make sure that happens. And if by some, chance you are able to win in spite of his efforts, he wants to box you in so you have no exit, and it's, dramatically politically unpopular for you to leave at that point. So, I mean, they have fallen into his traps every step of the way, and I didn't expect her to have any moral qualms. I thought it would all be ambition driven, but she seems to be engaging in the same outdated, foolish political calculus that leads her into the same, foolish bear hug position of Joe Biden. And that is deeply, deeply disappointing.
Yep.
All right. I got the part 3 here. Last piece. Let me go ahead and pull this up. Here we go.
Country is just starting to get to know you. I want to ask you a question about how you've described your service in the National Guard. You said that you carried weapons in war, but you have never deployed actually in a war zone. Campaign officials said that you misspoke. Did you?
Well, first of all, I'm incredibly proud. I've done 24 years of wearing the uniform of this country. Equally proud of my service in a public school classroom, whether it's Congress or the governor. My record speaks for itself, but I think people are coming to get to know me. I speak like they do. I speak candidly. I wear my emotions on my sleeves, and I speak especially passionately about our children being shot in schools and around guns. So I think people know me. They know who I am. They know where my heart is. And again, my record has been out there for over 40 years to speak for itself.
And the idea that you said that you were in war. Yeah. Did you misspeak as the campaign has said?
Yeah, I said we were talking about, in this case, this was after a school shooting, the ideas of carrying these weapons of war. And my wife, the English, you told my grammar's not always correct. But again, if it's not this, it's an attack on my children for showing love for me, or it's an attack on my dog. I'm not going to do that. And the one thing I'll never do is I'll never demean another member's service in any way. I never have, and I never will.
What'd you think, Ryan?
He forgot in the first answer to contextualize it, and Dana kind of helps him out with the follow-up answer. His quote where he said he carried weapons in war was in this congressional debate about an assault weapon ban in the wake of a school shooting. So he was indeed talking about weapons of war. The way he said it was quite misleading. He said, "I've carried weapons in war." But yeah. he should have contextualized what the debate was first. I also think he should just let people know what the argument is about, because so many people are not following it. He deployed as part of Operation Enduring Freedom to Europe, where Turkey, or I think it was Italy. So he deployed as part of OEF. And it is understandable. He could say it's understandable that people who are not in the military hear me say that I deployed as part of OEF to think that the deployment was either in Afghanistan or Iraq. But it was not. And people who are in the military understand that there are lots of kinds of deployments that do not involve, seeing combat or being in a war zone. So I don't know. What did you make of it?
So I think I agree more with your first point than your second point. I think probably the best way to respond to this is to immediately shift from, clearly he misspoke, whether it was intentionally misleading or, or just a true slip of the tongue. Hard to say. People aren't likely to, trust politicians at their word with this stuff. But to immediately shift the frame to, well, let's talk about what I was talking about, though. Because, I was talking about our kids having to go to school and do lockdown drills, which our kids are all, back in school. Mine have already done their lockdown drills.
Hate those drills. Those drills are not helpful.
And my 7-year-old is coming home and asking me questions about it, and sort of freaked out. Like it's a horror. It is a horrible state of affairs that this is the reality in America. And as a public school teacher, no one would be better positioned to really speak to that horror and immediately shift the frame. So I think it would be fine for him to just be like, yeah, I just slipped of the tongue. I misspoke. But let me tell you what the real issue is here, and then move on. Because the minute you get in the weeds about like, well, my rank was technically this, but then I didn't fill out the paperwork, and then it's that, and then, yes, it was an operation. Then you're playing into their, what they want you to be talking about. The other thing that I would say is, when he immediately goes, if it wasn't this, it'd be my kid being, expressing love. It'd be the attacking my dog. I don't know if you guys saw this, but there was this whole like online conspiracy about how he was lying about it. It was insane. It was so ridiculous. And the right has given him that out because they do have Tim Walz derangement syndrome, and they have attacked him for some of the most ridiculous things. So if this, attack on him, quote unquote, misrepresenting his military service, if this was going to stick, they needed to stay in this lane rather than now trying to dig up like the most absurd minor. There was that story about, he said he got an award from the Chamber of Commerce, but actually it was the Junior Chamber of Commerce. Gotcha. So they kind of, back themselves into a corner by having Tim Walz derangement syndrome and attacking him for his kid and his dog, and getting whether it was the Chamber of Commerce or the Junior Chamber of Commerce wrong, or having a rally sign that was like, didn't have all the context of his service in Operation Enduring Freedom or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Just one other question, because again, this is all new. This was not however many days ago. This was not on either of your bingo cards, especially yours. You had to clarify that you had said that you and your wife used IVF, but it turned out you used a different kind of fertility in order to have children. And then when you ran for Congress in 2006, your campaign repeatedly made false statements about a 1995 arrest for drunk and reckless driving. What do you say to voters who aren't sure whether they can take you at your word?
Well, I've been very public. I think they can see my students come out, former folks I've served with, and they vouch for me. I certainly own my mistakes when I make them. The one thing I'll tell you is I wished in this country wouldn't have to do this. I spoke about our infertility issues because it's hell, and families know this. And I spoke about the treatments that were available to us that had those beautiful children there. That's quite a contrast in folks that are trying to take those rights away from us. And so I think people know who I am. They know that record. They've seen that. I've taught thousands of students. I've been out there. And I won't apologize for speaking passionately, whether it's guns in schools or protecting of reproductive rights. The contrast could not be clearer between what we're running against. The vice president's position on this has been clear. And I think most Americans get it if you've been through that. I don't think they're cutting hairs on IVF or IUI. I think what they're cutting hairs on is an abortion ban and the ability to be able to deny families the chance to have a beautiful child.
See, that I think is handled as well as you can. And say, I own my mistakes, but, here's the point. Let me take it back to the political issue.
Because he got... Correct me on I don't know quite the details. They got some fertility treatment, but it wasn't IVF.
It wasn't technically IVF. Yeah. So, in any case, which again, like I think
his point, the like depth of the pain and anxiety associated with it is equivalent, probably, is what he's saying, and I think that's fair.
Exactly. And like I said, just, shifting it from him and what he said to the issue itself, which is clearly a strong one for Democrats, as evidenced by Donald Trump himself sort of freaking out about it. I think is probably the best way that you talk about that.
Vice President Harris, you were a very strong.
I also just wanted to mention, I don't know if you noticed Kamala's face, like looking at him while he's speaking, but she loves this guy. Like she clearly has a lot of affection for him. It's very clear. It's like a proud mom looking at him while he's talking.
Staunch defender of President Biden's capacity to serve another 4 years. Right after the debate, you insisted that President Biden is extraordinarily strong. Given where we are now, do you have any regrets about what you told the American people?
No, not at all. Not at all. I have served with President Biden for almost 4 years now, and I'll tell you, it's one of the greatest honors of my career, truly. He cares so deeply about the American people. He is so smart and loyal to the American people. And I have spent hours upon hours with him, be it in the Oval Office or the Situation Room. He has the intelligence, the commitment, and the judgment and disposition that I think the American people rightly deserve in their president. By contrast, the former president has none of that. And so, one, I am so proud to have served as vice president to Joe Biden. And two, I'm so proud to be running with Tim Walz for president of the United States and to bring America what I believe the American people deserve, which is a new way forward, and turn the page on the last decade of what I believe has been contrary to where the spirit of our country really lies.
With the last
So she pivots there from, do you love Joe Biden? Yes, I love Joe Biden too. But let's talk about Donald Trump. Let me get off this whole Joe Biden situation as quick as I can and talk about this guy that we're going up against now.
It's how the whole country feels. So it's kind of an easy one.
That's what she's betting on too. Yeah. It's kind of one of her strengths has been the not going back frame of the campaign, which I think a lot of people do relate to. Of like, even though she's the sitting vice president, she feels like turning a page, as she said. She feels like she's kind of the change candidate, even though in a lot of ways she is reflective of, continuing the status quo of the Biden administration. And so she benefits from being in the vice presidential office, and people being able to envision her in that role, but also feeling like, just because, frankly, of her identity and her relative youth, et cetera, feeling like she is a turning of the page to a different era.
I think the polling shows people don't dislike Biden as a person. Maybe they should, but they don't. They just didn't want him to run for re-election as president.
Yeah, the most popular thing he's done as president is say he's not going to run again. You're like, oh, okay. We kind of like you now. That's fine. Yeah, so Republicans really wanted this to be, because, it is a scandal that who knew the level of his decline, like what was going on behind the scenes that you all were covering up. It is a genuine scandal, and Republicans really wanted this to be a problem for her. And people are just so relieved to not have Biden on the ticket and there's such overwhelming support for him making that move that it has not landed as a political attack whatsoever.
Yeah, because by virtue of the scandal that it was, and the scandal was that he was trying to run for re-election. By not running for re-election, the scandal goes away.
True. Yeah, that's true.
last decade, of course, the last 3.5 years has been part of your administration.
I'm talking about an era that started about a decade ago, where there is some suggestion, warped I believe it to be, that the measure of the strength of a leader is based on who you beat down, instead of where I believe most Americans are, which is to believe that the true measure of the strength of a leader is based on who you lift up. That's what's at stake as much as any other detail that we could discuss in this election.
Because we haven't had a chance to talk, I'm just curious, staying on President Biden, when he called you and said he was pulling out of the race, what was that like? And did he offer to endorse you right away, or did you ask for it?
Hard-hitting question there, Ryan, right?
It's like this
really
is
had
when
to
you're
steel
like,
herself for this one.
This is when you really are starting to sympathize with conservative criticism of outlets like CNN, where you're like, seriously? Like, if you're Vanity Fair and you're doing like a magazine profile, this is interesting stuff, and then you can write some flowery narrative around it. Mm-hmm. For a sit-down interview that with a presidential candidate who hasn't given an interview yet, you got to use your time to hit him on policy.
Well, that's the thing too. Having done these interviews, you and I both, with presidential candidates or other type of candidates, you are very aware. I've got a clock ticking from the moment we say go until the moment it's over. And I have to be very strategic about what I get in and what is most consequential. And, and try to either I'm going to really drill in on a couple of issues, or I'm going to have a wide ranging conversation, hit on as many possible things as I can. I think that's probably the approach I would take here, just because she hasn't given an interview. So we don't have her on the record. So I try to get her on the record on as many issues as you possibly could. So to spend, there's 5 minutes left in this interview. 5 minutes, you can get a lot accomplished, and
Right.
all of it is just dedicated. You're about to hear to Kamala talking about like cooking pancakes and her admittedly adorable baby nieces wanting more bacon and whatever when Joe Biden calls.
Yep.
It was a Sunday, so here I'll give you a little too much information.
Go for it. There's no such thing, Madam Vice President.
My family was staying with us, and including my baby nieces, and we had just had pancakes, and Auntie, can I have more bacon? Yes, I'll make you more bacon. And then we were sitting down to do a puzzle, and the phone rang, and it was Joe Biden, and he told me what he had decided to do, and I asked him, "Are you sure?" And he said yes, and that's how I learned about it.
And what about the endorsement? Did you ask for it?
And he was very clear that he was going to support me.
So when he called to tell you, he said, I'm pulling out of the race and I'm going to support you.
Well, my first thought was not about me, to be honest with you. My first thought was about him, to be honest. I think history is going to show a number of things about Joe Biden's presidency. I think history is going to show that in so many ways it was transformative, be it on what we have accomplished around finally investing in America's infrastructure, investing in new economies, in new industries, what we have done to bring our allies back together and have confidence in who we are as America and grow that alliance, what we have done to stand true to our principles, including the one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I think history is going to show not only has Joe Biden led an administration that has achieved those extraordinary successes, but the character of the man is one that he has been in his life and career, including as a president, quite selfless and puts the American people first.
I just have to ask you both about two standout moments, aside, of course, from the addresses that you both gave, but standout moments that were perhaps unexpected during the convention. You mentioned one of them, Governor. A moment that you shared, that the world shared with your son, Gus. You were speaking, the camera caught him.
It's another incredible softball. I did think they talked about pancakes and bacon for the last 5 minutes, but apparently they also, let Tim Walz talk about how much he loves his family too. And I mean, the Kamala moment there, like, is charming. She's charming in that moment. It's like an in-kind contribution though. Like, that's not your goal and your job in these interviews isn't like to make people feel warm fuzzies and do basically a campaign ad for them. It's supposed to be to hold power to account.
Also, is there any chance that her first thought was about him?
No.
Any chance on earth? No. Any chance whatsoever?
No.
There's a scene in Veep where Selena Meyer gets a call that the president is not running for re-election and instead she's going to run. That's how that went down. Like,
see, I never watched. I watched like maybe 2 episodes of Veep, so I'm not familiar with the whole.
You're not prepared
Veep
for this
universe.
administration.
I guess I got to watch it. I'll put that on the list for me and Kyle because I don't think he's watched it. I'm not sure. Maybe he has.
Oh my God, it's a documentary.
That's scary. Scary. All right, let's finish this out.
So incredibly proud of you, so emotional, saying, "That's my dad."
Yeah, I don't know as a father I could have ever imagined that. I'm grateful for so many reasons to be on this ticket, but that moment, to understand what was really important, to have my son feel a sense of pride in me, that I was trying to do the right thing. And it was, you try and protect your kids, it brings notoriety and things, but it was just such a visceral, emotional moment that I'm grateful I got to experience it. And I'm so proud of him. I'm proud of him. I'm proud of Hope. I'm proud of Gwen.
It says breaking Walz. What it was? It was like Walz grateful for visceral emotional moment with son at DNC. Some breaking news there, Ryan.
I mean, it is true that it is very rare that children, let alone take pride in their parents, but even look at them as human beings. So yeah, I have no doubt that was an authentically invigorating and experience that he'll remember the rest of his life. No doubt about it. What does that have to do with anything? I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
To experience it, and I'm so proud of him. I'm proud of him. I'm proud of Hope. I'm proud of Gwen. She's a wonderful mother, and these are great kids. And I think the one thing is talking about the era we're in is our politics can be better. It can be different. We can show some of these things, and we can have families involved in this. And I hope that I hope people felt that out there, and I hope they hug their kids a little tighter because you just never know, and life can be kind of hard.
How good is he though to immediately pivot from that to hit one of his core themes of we can get back to the Thanksgiving dinner table where we don't all hate each other and dread it and whatever.
Pretty masterful politician.
Yeah, he really is. I'd be happy to just skip the Kamala Harris era and go straight to the Tim Walz era personally.
Last question.
Open primary we might have.
Yeah, very true. Very possible.
Madam Vice President, the photograph that has gone viral. You were speaking, one of your grandnieces that you were just talking about was watching you accept the nomination. You didn't explicitly talk about gender or race in your speech, but it obviously means a lot to a lot of people, and that viral picture really says it. What does it mean to you?
I am running because I believe that I am the best person to do this job at this moment, for all Americans, regardless of race and gender. But I did see that photograph, and I was deeply touched by it. And you're right, it's the back of her head, her two little braids, and then I'm in the front of the photograph, obviously speaking. And it's very humbling. It's very humbling in many ways.
Did she talk to you about it afterwards?
Oh, she had a lot to talk about. She had a lot. She listened to everything, and she listens to everything.
Give you your hot takes?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Madam Vice President, Governor Walz, thank you so much for your time.
So there you go. But that last answer, very emblematic of how she's really adopted more of an Obama approach to the quote unquote historic nature of her candidacy. She lets it speak for herself. She really wants to give comfort to everyone that, listen, I'm not going to talk about like all this black stuff. I'm going to be a president for everybody. And if it means something to you, that's great. But that's not the reason I'm here. And I think that's
sad that that's what she has to do. But
I think it's the right approach. I mean, but on the other hand, like, obviously representation matters, and it does speak for itself, but more important is, okay, what are you going to do on Roe versus Wade that is going to be much more impactful to all women versus, you yourself, Kamala Harris, transcending to this position of power?
Yeah. But yeah, again, if you're a conservative watching that, you're like, how is this is this a journalist? What's going on here?
Yeah.
And it's fine. Like, it is a cool picture, and for the public to, and Democrats in particular, to love the picture, that's great. But for the media, to take the opportunity of this interview to just elevate that and give her an opportunity to sell it more, it's just, I mean, CNN's going to do what it's going to do, but
yeah,
they can't complain then when people see them as Democratic Party apparatchiks.
That's exactly right. Overall, TLDR, what grade do you give her? Do you think this is going to be consequential in any way? Are there any moments from this that sort of survived the weekend?
I think she did fine enough. I think, it was much better than her previous interviews. It was pretty easy interview. Like, there were no really tough questions. The only reason that questions were tough is because there were some obvious ones. Like, you used to say the complete opposite of what you say now. Why?
Right.
But she didn't do the word salad that she's famous for the most part. And
True.
So I think, and like we were saying earlier, unlike Obama, who people really vested all of their hopes and dreams into and were willing to let them lead them wherever, that's not how people feel about Harris. They just want her to not fall over, and they will, the crowd will carry her on their shoulders across the finish line. They're like, just be alive, just be better than Biden.
Yeah.
And she's doing that.
Yeah. It's also the case that the bar has been, it is fair to say, the bar has been set exceptionally low
Yes.
because of Biden, but also because all we've really seen of her for the Biden administration has been whatever word salad clips have been cut and shared virally. And so there's a caricature of her, number one. And number two, that forgets some of the moments where she has been strong and capable. And she's obviously, I think she also has an added confidence and swagger in this moment she didn't previously have. And I also think she probably grew on the job as vice president, even though we weren't seeing everything she was doing. She was doing some stuff and having to get reps in and hone some of her skills and get better. So, I think Republicans will be disappointed that she isn't actually the caricature that they had in their mind, where she's just totally incapable of answering any question without a script right in front of her or someone holding her hand, etc.
Yeah, I think that she had a month to prepare for it.
Yeah.
And so she did some prep. Previously, the concern among her departed staff was that she refused to prepare for interviews and flubbed, easy questions.
Obvious questions, yeah.
She did that at the start of this one.
The day one.
But was prepared for other ones. And so, yeah, it's like she should do more of these and not make it like a national event when she does an interview.
Where we have to do an hour and 20-minute response, parsing every single answer because this is all we have. This is all we have at this point of, what she's given us in terms of interview sit-downs. Do you think that this, when do you think is the next time? Do you think now she'll feel like, okay, maybe I can do a few of these and I can survive it? Or do you think she'll feel like, all right, checked that box. I'm not going to have to do another one of these for another month and a half.
Maybe she'll do one a little sooner. Yeah. Or maybe she'll just punt, like, because what they did, they punted it to the end of the month, and then they did it right before Labor Day. Mm-hmm. So they'll skip Labor Day week next week. Then they'll be then they got the debate, like, so that'll buy them some time.
True.
So maybe not until a couple weeks after the debate. And then there's the Walz debate. So, they might punt it. They'll punt it for as long as the media and the public lets them get away with it.
Yeah, and I actually think the media and the public are pretty much going to let her get away with it. To be honest with you, I don't see that there was like a huge, real back. I think she probably could have. They felt pressure, and the media was getting pissier and testier. There's the other danger with this is they stop liking you and they start being more aggressive with you.
They start doing tougher stories, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think they were starting to feel some of that build, but I have a feeling that you're right, that she's going to feel like I checked the box. So I don't have to do this again for a while. So enjoy it, guys. All right, Ryan, thanks for doing this with me this morning. Enjoy the long weekend, guys. Enjoy Labor Day, and we will see you back for a full Breaking Point show.
And we've got the Friday show actually.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, tease
It'll
that.
be up later today.
You guys had a RFK Jr. debate.
Yeah.
That was Michael Tracy and then a field staffer for RFK,
Jeff
right?
Hutt, who was previous national field director for RFK, kind of defending his decision to endorse Trump.
I haven't checked that one out yet, so I'm looking forward to seeing that. I know Michael Tracy's been going hard in the paint as he is wont to do. So, all right, y'all, enjoy that. Check out Drive Site News, and I will see you guys back here on Tuesday. Bye, y'all.